Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you are today watching this webinar. Thanks so much for joining me. I look forward to getting to know each of you a little better in the Q&A session. Today, it's Tales from the Road Less Traveled. I'm Bill Murray, Innovation Catalyst. And what I want to do today is share a little bit about how the techniques of research that is engaged at the startup level might inspire corporate level research. A little bit about who I am. I split my time between working in the corporate setting, helping corporate teams get the permission and skills to unlock their potential, to develop new products, services, to make existing products and services better. In my spare time, I spend a lot of time with startups around the world. And I think the thing that I do best is help them look past their passion for a solution that they probably had an idea around that started their path down the startup in the startup world. Instead, help them fall in love with problems instead of solutions. My passion for this work, this kind of work in general, is number one, it's the thrill of the hunt. I enjoy the puzzle of solving business problems and finding that one insight that that nobody else found or nobody stuck around long enough to find. What's interesting is as I work with teams to work this way, to go deep into customer discovery, to get evidence, to build based on that evidence, it has a transformational impact on both the professional and personal lives of these people. And it changes the path of their life forever in a really profoundly positive way. And that's really exciting to me to be able to be part of that and to be able to continue to work with these people long after our engagement is over. So why am I talking today? What provoked me to have this conversation? Well, when I talk to my friends in the market research business, I feel like there might be a place, maybe more of a place at least, from time to time to connect with customers or consumers in a more intimate way. The tools of macro research areas are great. Data analytics are great, and they do a great job of helping out in the right situations. But I feel like in some situations, there's a risk of drift away from the customer if we don't check in periodically to revalidate, devalidate, invalidate our insights or even find new ones. So today I'm going to share some simple stories from sort of startup-y corporate projects and outside of corporate projects, and let you to be the judge of what kinds of tactics might be interesting for you to employ a little bit more often in the research that you do. So what is a startup? Well, startup defined by Steve Blank is a temporary organization designed to search for repeatable and visible, scalable business model. Obviously, in the media and the common parlance, a startup is just a new company or something kind of edgy or trying to do something innovative. But really, it's important to consider a startup simply as a learning organization. And when they find that repeatable business model, they're not a startup anymore. They move on to something else, and I'll show you that in just a few minutes. The temporary nature of startups is due to the runway, and runway is really the defining force acting on a startup. The tactics that startups employ are chosen to maximize speed to learning and optimize for that situation that they're in. Getting evidence as quickly as possible, learning immediately from that evidence, using behavioral experimentation and understanding the say-do gap that customers always have, and getting enough evidence to either graduate up to that next step or to be able to confidently get additional investor funding to extend that runway to learn what else they need to learn. So research at a startup is pretty simple, and but there's a lot of design blended with it. You're going to see a lot of design in the moment. When we learn something in startup mode, if it's possible, it's always nice to test that in that moment. A customer says something or does something. We'd like to take that moment to test, to see, to unpack what it is that's going on. it's a highly ambiguous environment. I mean, that is the definition of innovation. We don't know what we don't know, but we have a great opportunity to learn. It's all about fidelity too, especially at the earliest stages. What's the simplest thing that we could do to learn the thing that we have to learn to be able to keep moving? And how do we slowly over time increase the fidelity of our experiments and the work that we're doing to get the right amount of evidence, the right kind of evidence to keep us moving? We work with very small numbers of highly motivated customers. There's a bias to action. We talk about being scrappy, not crappy. We work in the signals world, not really in the statistical significance world, because we just don't have the time or the money to do that. And we don't need to yet early on, because we're working with small groups of usually early adopter customers, and which I'll talk about shortly. Ultimately within a corporation, this sort of work is great for informing new product development teams. And really the product of these teams are those insights and those behaviors that we've proven that then can be used to build new products and services. You're probably familiar with this. This is the adoption curve. You recognize everything here, but let me talk about where startups focus their research. It's on the innovators and the early adopters, and we split those out. The innovators are interesting because we don't actually market to innovators in a startup setting, but we use them to test or to get new ideas, because innovators, what they've done is they've already figured it out for themselves. They've solved their problem. Before there were smartphones, there were innovators out there who were building their own. They were ugly, and they fit in about the size of a shoebox, but they did all the things that ultimately smartphones today do. So we spend time with them, we observe them, we understand the journey they got from being having a problem and actually solving that problem in a creative way. And then we use elements of that with the early adopters to test to see whether or not some of those things might be transferable. The early adopter then is that person who does have the pain, does have the problem, does have the job to be done of some kind, but isn't able to solve it themselves. They may be actively trying to solve it, but failing. But we know they actually have time and budget to do it because they have a very focused version of the problem. These are great people to start with because they're much more predictable to work with. Once we have sort of that early business model and product developed for the early adopters, then we run into something called crossing the chasm. There's a book by the same name you may be familiar with. It's moving from the early adopter to the early majority, and the early majority has different expectations, higher standards, different versions and depths of the problem. And so what happens is we go from business model innovation in these early stages with the innovators and the early adopters to a different type of innovation around marketing. And this is kind of my favorite spot, because at this point, I really love throwing this over the fence to my friends in market research, because they can do a really great job with my team to understand how we can now market this product within this business model to a new group of people that may have different needs that we can go out and study really well. So the tools we used are a lot of in-depth interviews. It may sound like a broken record as I go through some of these stories, but that's what we have to do at these early stages. We have to really understand these people better than they understand themselves. We talk to the early adopters, we talk to the innovators, we talk to influencers, stakeholders, everyone that's involved in the decisions that are going on around this problem. We do a lot of ecosystem observation, aisle intercepts, watching people, some of that creepy stuff. But we use out-based thinking and jobs to be done theory. We think about what it is that the customer is trying to accomplish. We don't think about solutions, because solutions are what it takes to get them to the outcome. But solutions can be barriers or bridges. And we ultimately want our solution to be a bridge, but if we're not careful, it can become a barrier. We use sacrificial concepts, prototyping, imposter judo. We'll take an existing product in the marketplace and give it to our customer and see how they use it to understand, how close it is to solving their problem. Some of this is uncomfortable, especially inside of a corporation, because some of it feels a bit like a bait and switch. That said, we always deliver value to our customer at the end of an experiment. It just might not be exactly what we started by offering them. We engage in customer development. We understand the path of getting people from not aware of what it is we do in our value proposition all the way to passionate and actually becoming a net promoter for us. And then the biggest tool we use that I love the most is when we can get one of these early adopter customers to engage in co-creation with us. That's when things really get interesting, because we're able to see that early adopter when we give them the tools or the resources that they didn't have, that the innovator did, to see if they can actually solve the problem themselves. And then it's up to us to turn that into something that's marketable. But it all still starts with a research question. So it's no different than the research that everyone else is doing. But sometimes it may be a bit broader, might be a little bit nebulous, but it's a place to start. And the three I'm going to cover today are, the first one here should strike you as a bit strange, but why do customers think that insurance sucks? How do college student borrowers view post-college debt? And what motivates employees to refer friends and family at our company? So we'll start with why does insurance suck? We're a team of 4. We were given 90 days. And in that time, we came up with a scalable business model, but the company passed on the opportunity because it just didn't fit with anything else they were doing. That said, it was an incredible journey. And what we learned from this continues to impact the work that I do today with teams. So why does insurance suck was a terrible question to start with. But what it did, though, is it gave us a lot of latitude to go out and talk to people about their attitudes of insurance and what it was that they were trying to protect in life. After a couple of weeks and about 30 interviews, we started running into a couple of people that were talking about this sort of desire to move up what we knew as Maslow's hierarchy, but they couldn't because they lacked key resources. We then focused, understanding who these potential customers were. We focused our look and we're able to find a lot more of them. Kind of under every rock, we were finding this person. We called this person Alex. Alex was a he or she, but ultimately we found that Alex was stuck. Alex was stuck because she wanted to move up, but couldn't because it was too risky. And without resources, there was no way that she could do this. Ultimately, the insight is what Alex told us is that insurance products don't protect me from what really matters. And what really matters is this more fulfilling life that I can see right here, but I can't grasp it. Getting there is too risky. I've worked too hard to get to where I am to be able to have to, take a step back potentially if what I thought was out there for me turns out to be not what I thought. Ultimately, it was powerful because we went from interviews to sort of a product that we pieced together with resources of we had a kind of a full stack psychologist on retainer with us, and she would do things like job counseling and life counseling and just straight psychological counseling with our customers, and would help to understand what it is that they needed. We were then able to build stuff out of that we could hand to these customers, and they would jump for because they saw that it was helping them move forward. Ultimately, we were able to help a number of these people actually test the waters of these new lives that they saw ahead of them. Some made a permanent jump, others were able to test it, and they were able to come back, which was a key part of our product. That ability to come back, kind of like a mulligan in golf, in case the shot went wide. The behavioral experiments that we did were a combination of what we call kind of low and high hurdle that challenged them to go outside their comfort zone to interact with us. And in doing so, we saw the types of things that it would take to get them to move from a resource standpoint, and got it down to the point where we had basically 5 resources, and we knew that if we got the right mix for this person, that they could jump. So as I mentioned before, ultimately there's a big gap between what the insurance company believed and what the customer believed. The insurance company believed that insurance products were protecting you from all these things that could happen, whereas our Alex customer didn't believe that at all. In fact, believed that these insurance products were a barrier to moving forward because of the cost and because they actually kind of held them in place. They were looking for an insurance product that that took care of them. who's taking care of me as I try to move up? Who's protecting me in case I fall? And we were able to show that we could do that. The next project was around post-collegiate debt, and this was me and a peer from our life insurance company, and we were given 3 or 4 weeks to kind of explore a pre-packaged idea. And really it was sort of a pre-baked product idea from a $400 consultant who said, hey, people are in a lot of student loan trouble. They don't have a lot of money when they leave college. So what if we repurposed a traditional cash value life insurance to be able to take a loan from after they leave college so that they could put a down payment on their first car or their first apartment or that kind of thing. Now, I will admit that it sounded like a great idea. There obviously is a marketplace out there. We all know about the student loan problem. And so going in, I was actually excited about it and looking forward to finding out, how could we do something like this? But what happened is this one was very much centered just on interviews, on in-depth interviews. We decided to kind of take what I call an ecosystem look at the student loan kind of world when it comes to the student. And we identified sort of a small ecosystem of the student or the prospective student, parents, and then high school guidance counselors. These are the people that as we talked to people, were identified as sort of the players who had influence as they were making these decisions. I mean, what's interesting is that the life company assumed that college students were thinking beyond graduation, and I guess, spoiler alert, they weren't. Some of you may be in the same situation. You may even have student loans to this day. Thinking back to those times when you were taking out those loans, what we found in the vast majority of the people we talked to with students, that they weren't thinking about what that pile of loans was going to look like when they graduated, if they even graduated at all. And the biggest problem was that their parents weren't looking at it either. They were simply trying to get over this initial hump of, we just got to get into college. And high school guidance counselors weren't much help either. They certainly were warning them about the impact of loans, but they certainly weren't giving them any options to find some other way that wouldn't be as impactful. The key insight here is we talked to these folks, the students. We talked to students who are just going into school. Some of them were already in school and were accumulating debt, and then some that were after college and were still trying to come to grips with what they had. It was really, post-college problems are too nebulous to provide to provoke solution consideration while still in college. And when we set up the sort of interactive environment for our internal customer from the life company, after we did this research, we actually had a big board that was like before, during, and after college, and we strung a shower curtain across it at the point of graduation that was opaque and you couldn't see through it, and then you'd have to peek behind it if you wanted to see the things that came afterwards. And really, that was the best metaphor that we had for how students were looking at it. They either were unwilling or unable to look through or past that shower curtain to see what was going to happen afterwards. They just needed to get the college done, and then they would deal with those problems later. Well, obviously, as we all know, the problems that come up after college, can be crippling because of that debt. The action here, though, was that our recommendation was not to move forward with the product, because from what we saw when we described, as the mindset was described to us, there was just no way that we could put this product in the places where the company thought we could put it and actually get any traction at all. So our recommendation was not to pursue, and I'll still remember it probably to the day I die, is that the associate vice president turns to the director and says, well, I think we just saved 6 to 12 months and $1 million here. And people think of innovation or startups as new products and new solutions and that sort of thing. In this case, it was killing a zombie. And there's good money to be made in killing zombies, because that time and money now went towards something more profitable. Typically, when I do work like this, I work with a really great graphic designer. she has nice background sort of in design thinking, a little bit of startup experience herself. So she helps us build really great kind of collateral to come out of this. As I said, this was pretty much strictly an in-depth interview type of project because we were able to, we didn't need to experiment. There was no say-do gap. People were very clear. I'm not looking at the future. I'm just trying to get this taken care of. So, these the blurbs from these interviews and understanding how parents and students and even guidance counselors were kind of all working together towards the same sort of problem was all the evidence we really needed to sway the Life company to move on. So let's jump into employee referrals. This one was a little bit more in depth than the last one because we did do a bit of experimentation because we had to test a couple of things. But what was interesting about this one is up until this point, I had done a lot of projects around customers that had a pain, some sort of pain point, or customers that had a job to be done. But I'd never done a project around a passion, and that's sort of the three things that you run into. You're into pains, passions, and jobs to be done. And this one was a passion because what we found is that here we were charged with better understanding employee referrals, and the recruiting area of the company believed that monetary rewards for referrals was the driving force for the vast majority of referrals they got. And they were about to spend six-figure plus on a new referral generator that would emphasize the monetary reward aspect of a referral. And someone in that area suggested, hey, that might not be the case, and knew me and said, hey, do you mind if Uncle Bill and me take a couple of weeks to take a look at this? And they said fine, but just have to be done by, I think it was October 1st, because they were going to use the money before the end of the fiscal year to buy the software. So we jumped in, and we targeted people that represented a group that basically brought 80% plus of the referrals to the company. There was a fairly small group that represented most of the referral activity. And so we spent a lot of time with these people and did a lot of interviews with them, and even interviewed people that they had referred. And what's cool is through these interviews and through these interviews referrals, we learned some amazing stories, including one about a situation where someone had known someone in a prior line of work, and they had a mutual experience around the sergeant at arms around the local Hells Angels biker gang. So really amazing stories. And what we learned early on, and it was clear from the first, is that the monetary bonuses had nothing to do with what people were doing in the referral area, except for just one young woman who was trying to save up for a wedding. But even then, she was really glad for the financial aspect of it, and it did motivate her to bring in more people. But still, even with her, it was, hey, I get a chance to define who my coworkers are, and that's the biggest deal of all to her. And that was for everyone. It was having control around who they worked with. It was around having having an impact on people's lives, being a hero. And really the monetary thing was nothing. They talked about paying it forward, and I like the company I'm working for. Why wouldn't I want to bring other people in? So really the key insight of this is that the current system focuses on open position, not people and skills. So this limits referral activity, because the people we're talking to were telling us, I got tons of referrals sitting here, but whenever I look Monday morning at the new job openings, I don't see anything that fits any of these people. So our action then was to actually give them a new system that allowed them to refer people simply based on skills and fit to culture, instead of there being a specific job, and to make sure that they knew that these people that they referred would be contacted quickly and be treated very well, and would be first in line for new positions as they opened up. Again, this looks similar because it was a similar sort of concept, but I like this sort of format. We talked to these various referrers, some of whom referred other people, and some of these people were actually referred people. What's interesting is we were having this conversation with the designer. We were talking about all these different factors that influence people's ability to refer. And she said, gosh, it's almost like a formula. And, if any of you out there know me, I popped up in that moment like a meerkat, and I literally ran out of the room and ran to my desk and started figuring this out, because it was just that moment of epiphany. She's exactly right. It is a referral. And what we came up with was maybe the world's first and only, employment referral formula. And so basically it's awareness of a job opening. It's knowledge of a candidate. It's job fit for that candidate's skills. It's culture fit of the candidate with the company. And then we subtract off two sort of reputation sort of aspects. And one is my professional reputation. Hey, I like this person, and they might be okay for this job, but will they embarrass me professionally? Maybe they're a bit of a goof. And then the second one is the personal reputation. Hey, if I refer this person, might they be mistreated or get a bad shake here, and then it might damage my personal relationship with them. So then once we get all that together, we saw that none of that would matter if the person didn't like working at the company. So if W equals 0, in other words, they don't feel good about working at the company, they're certainly not going to refer them. I don't know about you, but if I go to a bad restaurant or see a bad movie, I don't recommend it to other people. So here the W needs to be, close to 1, and then the referral is going to happen. So to wrap things up, food for thought: have a startup mindset, fall in love with problems, not solutions. Focus on outcomes, be scrappy, not crappy. Learn and deliver right-sized value iteratively. Work in sprints is a great way to do that, to kind of compartmentalize your work and deliver things to your customers quickly so you can understand whether or not you're on the right track or not. Runway urgency, as we mentioned before, whether it's time or money, put some urgency in that work and say, what is it that we can build in this short time? Can we get our internal customer who wants this research work moving more quickly, and understanding whether or not we've built them the right thing, the right amount of it. We can always build more later on if we need to. And most of all, I think that I share with the teams that I work is rig your work to surprise you, not the opposite. So much research work and startup work that I see is rigged for a solution or for an outcome that's already been assumed. And rarely is that the case. When you do your interviews, you do your experiments in a way that allows the customer the freedom to say something or do something you didn't expect, that's where the really amazing stuff comes from. And that's where you get that amazing insight that I mentioned earlier today, that someone didn't stick around long enough for, or didn't ask the right question around. Bottom line, your research work as a product, design it to drive customer outcomes. As it's said in Silicon Valley, if the first version of your product doesn't embarrass you, then you waited too long to release it. Don't be afraid to release an early version of your work. Every once in a while, your customer says, hey, that's fantastic. That's all we need to move on. Let your customer surprise you. So now we're on to the Q&A. As you're kind of thinking about questions that you may have, if you don't have one, I would love to hear your input on these 3 questions. What experiences have you had with startups or startup-like conditions? What kind of outcomes did you run into? Share with us a time that you learned something amazing. What set you up for that? What set you up for surprises we were just talking about? And then where in your current research work processes might startup tactics like these or mentalities like these drive some value? So let's take it away there and go into the Q&A. Thank you so much.